Oh, we did have an incident in the lobby downstairs a couple of days ago. Somebody got asked to take their feet out of the chair, and the person got up and wanted to fight. Yeah, somebody asked one of the staff downstairs. They had to, you know, the chairs downstairs that look like Mad Men, like 1960s. I can't stand those chairs. But anyway, somebody the last couple of days had sat in it, and evidently they had something on their leg or on their feet or whatever, and they got like black stuff all over the, you know, so somebody had to go in there and clean one of those chairs up. Well, a day or two later, somebody sat in one of the chairs and they took their shoes off, which is fine, but they put their feet in the chair after somebody had messed that chair up. You see what I'm saying? So one of the staff said, you know, could you please not put your feet in the chairs? And before she could even get out why, because she had to clean the chair before, this person got up and just got attitude and started wanting to fight a staff person. Live PD. I didn't do anything wrong. Oh well. So that was interesting. I don't understand why the person got mad because you were asked to take your feet out of the chair. I mean, this isn't your house, but I guess it's okay to put your feet in the chair now. Mr. Paps, do you do that? You don't just put your feet in the chair wherever you go? Okay. Well, I guess I don't understand. All right, now where were we? Do you remember? You said experiment / I'm getting there. There we go. Observation. I'm not going into all that. We were census. Did we go over census? Okay, control it, the government controlling and taking over. That's what that is. No, I'm just kidding. A census is something that's taken every 10 years. Every 10 years, why? Because they want to control us. No, they don't want to control us. They just want to know who lives in the country. Okay? They want to know, you know, how many people make this amount of money, how many people do this. I mean, where everybody lives, to help make, you know, populated areas, you know, how to divide it into voting precincts or whatever the case may be. How many federal monies are needed for this area as far as infrastructure, as far as roads. A lot of people complain about South Carolina roads. I agree with you. But you got to look at it this way. Are we New York? No. Okay? Are we Atlanta? No. I mean, the biggest town we got is probably Columbia. Okay? Of course, we got Greenville that wants to be the biggest town, but it's not. But Columbia is probably the biggest town, and that's the state capital. Okay? So, I don't mean to say anything, but if you've got $1 million of road money, and you've got Atlanta Airport, and you got a choice between Atlanta Airport and Columbia, where do you think the money's going to go? Atlanta Airport, or Atlanta, because of the infrastructure of Atlanta, is a whole lot up there more than Columbia. So it's kind of like, you know, the census does all this, and you get all this, and then they disperse the money, they disperse everything based on the census every 10 years. So that's not a test question in my class, but it's a test question on any standardized test. That's something everybody should know. Okay? Not a big deal. Random sampling. Did we discuss random samples? Talking about, okay. Random sample. What is a random sample? It's where everybody has an equal what? Chance of being picked. That's all you got to write down. Equal chance. A random sample is an equal chance. Now this is where we get into neutrality and bias. Okay? Let me give you an example of a random sample. I give everybody a yellow Post-it note. I tell everybody to write in black pen their first name, middle initial, last name, and fold the Post-it note in half. And we put it in a big fish bowl, and we mix it all up, and somebody's going to pick a name out of it. Everybody with me? That is a random sample. Is there any way that I can be biased on who I pick out of that punch bowl? No. Now, let's say that Mr. Ramsey, being the rebel that he is, let's say that he decides to take the pink Post-it notes out of his book bag and throw the yellow one I gave him away and write on a pink Post-it note and put it in the fishbowl. Is it still a random sample? Not really. Why? Because what does the person that puts their hand in the punch bowl, what do they have? They have eyes, right? They see that what? That pink one in there. Now they're going to make one of two decisions. What's those two decisions? What's those two choices? I'm going to stay away from the pink one when I pick, or I'm going to pick the pink one. So does everybody have an equal chance then? No. Mr. Ramsey don't have an equal chance if I say I'm not going to pick that pink one. Nobody has the chance goes to Mr. Ramsey if the person that picks it says I'm going to pick that pink one. You see how that works? Even though you think you're neutral, you may not be. Okay, now let me go ahead and write this down. Statistics is a science that you have to be neutral. You have to be. And you have to be very careful. You can spend a whole semester on being neutral. Okay, you don't have to write all that down. All you have to write down is statistics. Probability and statistics is a science that you have to be neutral. Well, let's say that Mr. Paps, he takes his yellow Post-it note and he folds it in eighths. Folds it once, then he folds it twice, then he folds it a third time. Well, let's say the person is blindfolded that picks from the punch bowl. Well, in this case, since the person is blindfolded, Mr. Ramsey hasn't done anything to mess up the status quo, has he? Because you can't see the pink and it's folded the same way. But what's the person going to do naturally when they put their hand in the cookie jar or whatever? They're going to feel around, right? And they're going to mix them up and they're going to feel Mr. Pap's folded paper. It's going to feel like a, compared to the others, it's going to feel like a rock. So what is that person, what's the two choices the blindfolded person is going to say? I'm either going to pick this one or I'm going to stay away from the folded one. See what I'm saying? So as something as trivial and small as the color of a slip of paper or how it's folded could be bias. Now, you take that and you inflate it to a question on a survey. You're not going to vote for John Smith on November the 6th, are you? Is that a good question? No, that's a leading question. You even have to watch how you write a question on a survey. You can't say, okay, are you going to vote for John Smith or are you going to vote for Matilda Gertrude? Well, there's 5 other candidates. Why aren't you listing them? You can't do that either. That's an invalid statement or an invalid question because you can't just take the 2 people you want and put it on there. You got to put all 5 people. If there's 5 people running, you got to put 5 people down. Or you got to put 2 and say, and leave a blank for other. You see what I'm saying? You got to have an ample avenue for all the candidates, not just 2. Now, in the news today, you see a lot of bias, whether it be policy or whether it be a person or whether it be, and I'm not talking about the news, I'm talking about in magazines. You may see people go against somebody because they don't like the way they say something, okay? And I'm talking about celebrities. I'm talking about not just politicians, but celebrities. You see it. Is that right? No, it's not right. Especially, what is the media supposed to be doing? Okay? What is the newspaper supposed to be doing? What is the magazine supposed to be doing? I always thought that they were supposed to inform you. That's what I always thought that was, when you turn on the radio, what is the radio supposed to do? Inform you. Are they informing us today, or are they trying to change our minds about things? I don't know. That's up to you to decide. But you can't, in some positions, you can't be biased. For instance, let's say I decided I'm going to do a survey and I'm going to go across the nation and I'm going to ask people if they're going to vote for John Smith or Gertrude Jones. Okay? And John Smith is the more conservative candidate and Gertrude Jones is the less conservative candidate. And I go across the United States and I find out that everybody's going to vote for the first guy. I don't forget his name. All right? This is more conservative. Well, what's wrong with that? Well, I forgot to tell you that I went from South Carolina to Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, New Orleans, Texas, and then I don't know what's between Texas and California, but I think New Mexico and Arizona? Okay, I always get kind of fuzzy right in there. And then California, Nevada, or whatever. All right, what did I just do? I went across the United States, didn't I? Yeah. But what did I neglect to tell you? I hit the most conservative region, which is the Southeast and the South. You see what I'm saying? Was I biased? Yeah, I was biased. I didn't go into the certain, urban cities, inner cities. I didn't go into the inner cities, which predominantly vote for the less conservative candidate. I went through the South. That's bias. Y'all, you got to watch this, and that's knowledge is power. When you read articles, you gotta get into it and see, is this person trying to inform me or trying to indoctrinate me? Same thing with teachers. You got to watch it. Some teachers. Now, what's the difference between informing and being biased? Well, let's say I asked Mr. Ramsey, what color is the sky, Mr. Ramsey? What's Mr. Ramsey going to say? Blue. You're wrong. That's not right. You don't sit there and go, especially in a learning environment, you don't sit there and go, you're wrong. Your opinion is wrong. No, that don't work. Now, if you have a discussion, that's different. But when somebody says you're wrong and you have an opinion, that's incorrect. That's where you see the bias come in teaching. All right? So, with statistics, you have to be right down the middle. I'm going to give you one more example of neutrality, not bias. I'm on the land use board, and on the land use board, we have to decide things that staff can't decide legally. So we have to listen to a person's complaint, and usually it's about a setback or wanting to do this. Well, there was one that came before us about 2 or 3 months ago, and a man wanted to put, no, he didn't want to do it. He wanted to be able to put a septic tank, everybody knows what a septic tank is, right, on a piece of property, and it was 0.68 acres. Okay, everybody with me? Well, the county regulation says you can't put a septic tank on less than 0.75 acres, which is 3/4 of an acre. Now, I think y'all understand why you don't want to put a septic tank on a small lot. Okay? I think y'all understand that. Y'all know what a septic tank is, and it has to do its job, but on a small lot, it can't do its job because it doesn't have enough dirt or doesn't have enough runoff. Everybody with me? So, we had about 18 people there, and one person for this one case, the one person was for it, and 17 people were against him doing what he wanted to do. Everybody with me? So I get up there, and I'm sitting up there, and I do go through the blah, 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 go through this, and then I say, okay, you speak, and then all the 17 people had to speak. Oh, and they only get like 5 minutes to speak because some of them will sit there and talk for an hour. So everybody spoke, and it took about 30, 45 minutes. And every one of the 17 people, they didn't say anything about the septic tank. You know what they said? All he's going to do is put a mobile home on that place. Okay? Every one of them said that. Was I there? Was the board there to decide what he could do with the place, or could he put a septic tank on it? The board, we don't care if he puts a strip club on it. We don't care if he put. What was our goal? To decide whether he could put a what? A septic tank on the property. If you bring in whether he could put a mobile home on the property, that brings in what? Bias. I lived in a mobile home for 12 years when I first got married. There's nothing wrong with a mobile home, okay? So why are these people hollering about putting a mobile home on the property? That's not the question. And that's what I said in the meeting. I said, I appreciate everybody's input, but our decision is not whether he could put a mobile home, strip club, a bar. Hell, he could put a barn on it and put hay in it. Okay? He can do whatever he wants to with that property. Our decision is, can he put a what? A septic tank. And we denied it. We denied it because DHEC was going to deny it. Because DHEC has the same regulation we do. So, do you see the difference between neutrality and bias? That you can't interject your feelings into statistics. Now, a lot of you saying, golly, he spent 30 minutes talking about that. Why? Why did I just spend 20, 30 minutes on it? Because it's very important, not just for a test. It's very important for you when you're doing something. You may be asked, some of you may be nursing students, and you may be asked to give a presentation on the care of nurses or nursing care on the floor. And you go through and you do your research and you do this and you watch and you interview and you do this. You've got to be right down the what? Middle. You can't be biased either way. So it's very important. Quality assurance. Some of you are going to be working in quality assurance. You got to be right down the middle. You got to be right down the middle. Think of give me two occupations that are right down the middle. That doesn't take into effect whether they like you or they, that doesn't have anything to do with it. Two occupations. Police officer. You're there you go. Judge. A judge. The reason I use judge is because a judge, you don't have people throwing things at a judge. You don't have people trying to shoot at you, So I kind of take the police officer, he or she sometimes is trying to live, okay? The judge is, have y'all seen the new show, Court TV? Have y'all seen that new show? Oh my gosh. Dang old judge be attacked and people try to jump up and kill the judge. Yeah, these people are crazy. They're live PD, they move over into Court TV, and it gets to be kind of rough in there too. But anyway, it's the same channel live PD comes on. Pretty cool. Anyway, I tell you, I like to see when they get tased too. I love to see them get tased. But anyway, the whole thing of it is a judge. Now, I don't think anybody in here could say a judge is biased or not, because you got to sit in the seat of a judge in order to say if a judge is biased. But in my encounters with judges, they have usually made the right decision. And the one I've had about 5 or 6 instances, 2 or 3 where I was a witness, and 2 or 3 where I was just watching. And sometimes their decisions are right down the middle. Now, excluding Clemson fans, who is the other occupation? On the football field, maybe. The ref. Excluding Clemson. Clemson fans, I'm not talking about Clemson supporters. Okay? 2 different animals. Clemson fans, if Clemson loses, the Clemson fans say it's all whose fault? the referee's fault. Always. That's the difference between a supporter and a fan. A supporter be like, okay, they got outplayed. We got beat. I don't use we because I don't play for the football team. So they got beat, just like LSU beat them. LSU beat them. Okay, there wasn't no refs. There was 2 or 3 bad calls on LSU. There was 2 or 3 bad calls on Clemson. But to sit there and say, oh, well, the referees were bought off, that's just ignorant. Okay, you know, ignorant is a whole lot worse than ignorant. Y'all know that, don't you? Just like whooping is a whole lot worse than a whipping. Okay, so 2 examples. Use those 2 examples. They'll help you with bias, okay? You can't have probability and statistics with bias. Simple random sample. What is a simple random sample? It's a group. Instead of giving you each a piece of yellow paper, I give these first 2 rows 1 piece of paper. The next 2 rows, 1 piece of paper. The next 2 rows, the next 2 rows, the next 2 rows, and this last row. So I got like 5 groups. Y'all each put y'all's initials on that group piece of paper, and I put it in a bowl. Instead of having 30 pieces of paper, now I got 7. Does everybody have the same chance of being picked? Yes. You see the difference between a random sample and a simple random sample? Okay, simple random sample usually has to do with a group because you have a big area. A big group. So instead of handing out a piece of paper to everybody, you hand the people out to groups. You hand the piece of paper out to groups. Stratified, that's grouping. A good example of a stratified group, that would be like a voting precinct. And what do I divide the voting precinct up in? Male or female? Or I can divide them up into Democrat, Republican, Independent, and other. Or I could divide them up into 18 to 25 and 25 and above, or 26 and above. I could divide that group into subgroups. That's stratified. Cluster would just be the precinct. You understand the difference between the 2? Precinct versus precinct subgroups. Stratified is when you have subgroups. Systematic. Systematic is usually the best one to use beside a random sample. Systematic is when you pick every 7th person, every 100th person in the phone book. The computer goes through and picks every 500th person in the county. What is systematic? A pattern. Y'all just eating this stuff up. Y'all are just so excited, aren't you? I'm trying to make it as, I told you, the first 2 chapters was all vocabulary words. It's about boring. Somebody stole my cousin's truck. Now, some of y'all may not be familiar with McClure Road, but some of you may live near a road that people don't steal on that road. You know why? Because they get shot. All right? Y'all know what I'm talking about? Well, McClure Road is one of those roads. Okay? Everybody on that road is related. Okay? And 2 years ago, somebody tried to steal from they always try to steal from my uncle for some reason. I don't know. I think it's, I don't know. I don't know what it is. But anyway, he shot one of them in the butt. Okay? And this guy, he just walks into the place in the middle of the day. I can't believe this. Maybe y'all can understand it. Walks into the place, middle of the day, walks into one of the sheds, cranks up a diesel truck, and takes it. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I don't know who this guy is or who this person is, but they dadgum brave because he would have shot him. I don't understand that. Now, what is that? This is not a damn thing. I'm just trying to lie, just trying to wake everybody up. But yeah, that happened yesterday. Can you believe that? Tell you one thing, he's lucky. He's lucky. Because my uncle, he don't care if he shoots a truck all to pieces. He'll shoot until he gets you. Maybe that's why I like to see drunk people getting tased. But y'all all know what I'm talking about. There's always a road somewhere where you live that, you know, they go Strawberry Lane's like that too. Coca Road, that's right in that area. You don't steal from those people because if they don't shoot you, they're going to hang you, one of the two. All right. Cluster sample. That's the one where I told you it's like a precinct. Well, what do you do after the precinct? That's it. You just ask who they voted for. You don't say, you don't divide it up into Democrat or Republican. You just say, who'd you vote for? Democrat or Republican? You don't get into the names. You just, what did you vote? Did you vote straight Democrat or did you vote straight Republican? Or you could go into the sample and ask them what they had for supper. I mean, you could ask them anything, but as long as you don't break them up into subgroups, that is the difference between a cluster and a stratified. Now, why am I telling you this? Are these on the test? No, I don't put these on the test because they can be kind of confusing to some people. Not random sample or systematic, but the difference between a cluster and a stratified can be confusing, so I usually don't test on the samples, but they are on standardized tests. Now, what do I mean by standardized tests? Well, some of y'all are in high school. What's the standardized test that you worry about? Whichever one you take now to get into colleges. Is it the ACT or the SAT? I'm sorry, what? Either one. Okay? I don't even know if I took the SAT. I think I fell asleep during it. We won't talk about that, okay? But anyway, you know, these are important. So you need to go through and mark which ones I tell you are standardized, because sometimes I don't test on the standardized questions. But all these samples, they're standardized. And the only one that's left is probably a convenience sample. Yep, convenience. I'm going to give you a good example of a convenience sample. Let's say I work at a radio station, and I'm one of the DJs, and the station that I work at is 80s rock, late 70s, 80s. I don't think 90s had any music, but anyway, the late 70s and 80s, okay, which is about next to the 60s, is about the best era for rock, okay. And I say, you know what? I need to do this project for my probability and statistics class, so I'm going to ask people on air to call in and tell me what kind of music they like. Why'd you laugh? Y'all need to speak. What? Okay, when I hear somebody say the answer and speak where I can hear them, I will say that's either correct or incorrect. But right now, y'all trying to get me to decipher mumble, and I don't decipher mumble. So let's try it again. Why are people laughing when I say my project is to find out what kind of music people like? And I announce it on my radio show.
It's a rock station, so people listen to it or not.
There, that's correct. I heard that. Y'all hear that? Yes. Yeah, that was that he articulated, and it was volume. Y'all ought to listen to my answering machine, my voicemail in the office. Oh my gosh, I got some people, I forward it to people and say, can you understand this? You'll sound like y'all from a foreign country. Speak up, articulate. Convenience sample is the least accurate because it's convenient. Now we're going to get into a subject here. I'm just going to get into it. In order to really benefit from something, you have to work. Yeah. Just want to throw that out there. In order to benefit from something, you have to work. Unless you live in Venezuela, where you eat your dog. Okay? In order for you to be a good statistics person, whether it be in a research environment like a research university, or whether you're doing it for your department, your nursing, I'm just using nursing, your floor, they're divided in floors, right? Anybody that knows nurses, 2 north is this, and 3 south is this, and they have a floor, and that's their department, okay? If you're presenting something in that department, you've got to do the work. A lot of people don't want to do the work, and then they get upset when they get their ass fired. Okay, that's a little bit from Chris Rock there, okay? Have you ever watched Chris Rock, How Not to Get Your Butt Beat by the Police? Google it, it's great. Okay? How to not get fired. Work. Okay? Do the work. Same thing with statistics. If you want to present something, you don't go out and pull 5 samples. You pull 500. Okay? So, convenient sample is the worst. It's the least accurate. Let me ask you something. Let's say I open that window right there with a chair, and I holler out there, and I see people walking. Not walking to their car, but let's say I live in an apartment. Let's say this is an apartment, and I open the window, and on the sidewalk, there's people walking. They're not walking to work. They're walking for health reasons. Everybody with me? And I holler out there, and I say, hey, y'all believe in a good, healthy lifestyle? What the hell are they doing? They're walking. What are they all going to say? Okay, convenient sample is the quickest, but it's the least accurate. Okay, so make sure you make that note. Okay? Sorry about giving you all the bad news about working. It's called raising the bar. I know, I'm a bastard. 1.5, bias, there we go. I already talked to you about bias. But sampling bias. An example of the sampling bias was when I went across the South. I told you I went across the United States, but what did I really do? I went across the South. That's a sampling bias. I sampled people, I knew what their question, the answer was going to be. You with me? Non-response bias. I use the non-response, I send out 100 surveys, and I get 30 back, and I count the 70 into the 70 that's not returned. Somehow I count them as no's to answer my question. You can't do that. Response bias, that's when you interpret what somebody says and you interpret it in your way. You can't do stuff like this. Okay, maybe the best word to come up with is fraud, because you're baiting somebody into thinking that you're not biased, but really you are, and you can't do statistics like that, especially if you're presenting for a paycheck. Now, if you're listening, then what big deal? You need to be able to pick out if somebody's being biased or not. Okay? I'm not going into these, but I'm going to leave them on the board for a couple of seconds, so that way if you watch, for the one person that watches the video, you can actually write these down. But sampling bias means the technique is undercoverage. What is undercoverage? Not working. Being lazy. You just put lazy beside undercoverage. Why? Well, I don't want to send out 500 and I have to count them, so I'm just going to send out 50. That's undercoverage. Now, later on in chapters 7 and 8, we're going to be finding out how big of a sample do we need to pick, okay, for a 95% confidence level. And sometimes it comes out to be thousands. But you don't say, well, I don't really want to do that, so I'm just going to do 50. That's called lowering the bar. That's called getting fired. Quit yawning in class. If you yawn more than 3 times, I'm going to throw you out. Dang old music teacher, dang old sneezing. When individuals selected to be in a sample do not respond, and the survey takes that into effect. If you have non-responses, you put in the presentation, 70 did not respond. Do you see that? You don't kind of incorporate that into your, well, if they didn't respond, that means they don't like this, what I'm asking. You can't do that. You have to say that 70 did not respond. I still haven't set I got to set my Tuesday, Thursday alarms. I hadn't set them yet. What time is it? Because I don't want y'all to start convulsing and doing the funky chicken on the floor. I still got 20 minutes, sorry. Response bias. You know, these can be when you're doing an interview. You don't really like this person, do you? What kind of a question is that? You don't really like this person, do you? You're not going to really, do this, are you? Those are leading questions. You can't do that. Misrepresenting answers. This person said, I don't know, so that means he doesn't agree with what's going on. Wording of questions. Can you trick people by the words you use? Yes. Knowledge is power. Data entry. Just put mistakes. Sometimes you transpose a number. Instead of putting 109, you put 190. But what if you do it on purpose? Then that's bias. The difference between an error, I have to say error because I say error, people don't know what I'm talking about. But if you have an error, that is a legitimate mistake. You transpose 2 numbers, you say I'm sorry, you fix it. If you have 15 transposed numbers, you either need medication or you're biased. You see what I'm saying? There's a difference between the two. Non-sampling, I'm not going to get into that. And that's a question for people that are doing research. I think that's a little bit too much for this. And that's 1.6. We don't go to 1.6, do we? Look in your outline. I think we're done with 1.5. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Chapter 2. Now, right now, everybody should be working on, I just finished chapter 1, so that means Tuesday, I'll be going over questions that y'all are sending. I'm getting questions from y'all as well as the other. So I might be going over them tomorrow, and I'll put it on the video. So it'll say questions chapter 1 when I go over the questions. I like to go over questions, especially these vocabulary questions. I usually go over those by chapter. When I get to the math questions, that's where I actually do, every day I go over questions because it's math. But all these, it's just a lot of reading, and I don't want to have to do that every day. So I just wait until after the end. So right now, everybody should be working on their homework 1.1 through 1.5 because you need to send questions before next Tuesday. Does everybody understand that? And the only things that you should not have done in 1.1 through 1.5 is the questions that you have sent me. And no, I'm not going to set a date for Tuesday. I'm not doing that. Dates are only for procrastinators. Right now, everybody, when Tuesday rolls around, you should be waiting on the questions that you've sent to finish your homework. And you should be able to finish it Tuesday night because I go over the questions Tuesday. Everybody with me? Okay. All right, so let's go over this. And make sure you watch the first and second day of class to understand what I mean by the questions being sent. by Ask My Instructor. Okay? That's what the second day is for. A frequency distribution. What is a frequency distribution? It's a table. I was going to show you one, but I'll write it on the board here. Hold on. A frequency distribution is a table. And sometimes, I told y'all this before, sometimes probability and statistics gets a little bit crazy. No sneezing. Gets a little bit crazy with the words and tries to give you big-ass words that mean little bitty things. A frequency distribution is a table. I'll show you what it is. You take your handy-dandy blondes, brunettes, and redheads. And I draw a little thing here. And I put my categories over here. Blondes. I don't usually do this with the mouse, but brunettes and redheads. And then I put 2, 4, 1. That is a frequency distribution. Now, how many times have you seen something like that and you didn't call it a frequency distribution, you called it a table? Okay, it's all it is. You put the category over here. It takes a talented person to write with a mouse. Okay, I'm not talented. I still can't do it. And this is called the head count, but not in statistics. Okay, the head count is called the frequency. So make sure you call it the frequency whenever you're talking to somebody educated. That is a frequency distribution. Now, you have two types of frequency distribution. You have a qualitative, which is right there, blondes, brunettes, and redheads, zip codes. How many people in here live in 29621? That is qualitative. Why? Because the math, the numbers don't mean what? Math. Or you've got categories. What if you had quantitative data? Quantitative data would mean what? You had something that mathematically means something, right? Yes, Hubert. Thank you, class. Appreciate the communication. It's always nice to have students to respond. Makes class go by faster. That way you're not as bored. And y'all still sit there and don't say a word. So let's put one up here. And we'll call, since it's qualitative, it's not categories, it's what? Class. A class is made up of two things. It's made up of the low, well, I just had a brain blow. I'll think of it in a minute. Lower class limit, thank you. Lower class limit and upper class limit. So 15 to 19, 20 to 24, 25 to 29, 30 to 34. And then over here, you got your head count. 2, 4, 6, 8. Now, with a quantitative list or table or frequency distribution, you got to be able to find a few things. One, you got to be able to find the class width. How do you find the class width? You subtract two coinciding what was that noise? Lower class limits or upper class limits. I'll give you an example. What's 20 minus 15? What's 25 minus 20? What's 24 minus 19? And what's 29 minus 24? So you can safely say that the class limit here, the class width is what? 5. Now a lot of people, that's not the way my teacher taught. Well, I'm sorry. 5 is the width. A lot of people say, well, why don't you just subtract 19 from 15 or 15 from 19? Okay, what's 19 minus 15? You're wrong. That's why. If you go linearly instead of vertically, you have to count on your fingers. This is one time I tell students to count on their fingers. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Class width is 5. If you subtract, you only get 4 because you're not counting the lower class limit or the upper class limit. Capiche? So go vertically, and that way you won't get it wrong. Okay, what else do you have to find? The midpoint. The midpoint is find an upper class, usually the first one, lower class limit plus the upper class limit divided by what? 2. So I'm going to do that over here. I'm going to put my midpoint. I'm going to call it X. X is usually called the midpoint. Later on, we're going to be putting it in formulas, and it's called X. So put X right here in parentheses. So what's 15 plus 19? 34, Hubert. That's right, class. And what's 34 divided by 2? Now, you can calculate each one, or you can take the first midpoint and keep adding the class width to it. So what is 17 plus 5? What's 22 plus 5?
27.
And what's 27 plus 5?
32.
Or you could add these two together and get 64. What's half of 64? However you want to do it. And that's how you find the midpoint. Now, why do you have to find the midpoint? Because with quantitative data, you can use what? Mathematics. And in order to use a formula for mathematics, you have to have a midpoint because you can't calculate 15 to 19. You see what I'm saying? How are you going to plug 15 to 19 in a formula? You can't, so you have to use the midpoint. That's why you have the midpoint or the mid-range. That's why you have it, so you can calculate with it. Capiche? I found out how to say, do you understand in Ukrainian yesterday, but I can't say it. So I told the student that they would pass the class if they teach me how to say that. It's like 15 syllables, so I got to figure out how to say it. Something like caprice, something like that. Now, I thought, no, this is another class. I don't have anybody in here that's Ukrainian, do I? I like that language. Russian and Ukrainian, those are nice languages. All right, 3. What is 3? Anybody know? Class boundaries. These are all my test questions as well as standardized test questions. The class boundary is easy to remember. All you got to do is just use a little bit of common sense. Okay? If you start with whole numbers, you go to the tenths. If you start with tenths, you go to the hundredths, and so on. So what do we have in this one? We have whole numbers, right? So, what is the number that comes before 15? Well, you can't say 14 because that's a whole number. You got to go to the 10th. Okay? So I'm going to say 14.5. Everybody with me? So I'm going to put 14.5 in small letters because that's a class boundary. Now add your what? Your class width, Hubert. That's right. So what's 14.5 plus 5? 19.5, 24.5, and 29.5. And that's how you do class boundary. Let me go ahead and tell you this, because most of the time you're going to use those two. You're going to use the whole to the 10th, and you're going to use a 10th to the whole, or the 100th. What if I gave you a class list and it was 15.0 to 19.9? Okay? Then you would use 100, and you would say 14.95. So you need to make that note. Usually when you go to the 100th, you use 0.95. When you go to the 10th, you use 0.5. You with me? So I would do 14.95, 19.95, 24.95, and 29.95 if that 15, 20, 25, and 30, if they were decimals to the 10th, whether it's 0.1 or 0.0 or 0.5 or whatever, you would do the boundary as 0.95 if it was to the 10th. What if it was to the 100th? Then you go to the 1000th. That would be 0.955. But you're not going to see that in any of these applications. So make sure you know all about a frequency distribution. Same thing, difference between a histogram and a bar chart. There is no difference. They're the same thing. But histogram sounds more sophisticated than bar chart. I think somebody just failed math back in the day, and they just wanted to make something that made them sound important, so they invented statistics. And they made these big-ass words so they could sound important. I don't know. You figure it out. But I still don't understand the difference between a histogram. People say, oh, the bars touch each other. Well, what's mathematically significant about two bars touching each other? That's not really significant mathematically. So why are they two different things? Anyway, I'll shut up. Redneck disorder. I'm having redneck disorder. I have it every now and then. I'm looking to make sure y'all not going to, okay, y'all, I got about a few more minutes before y'all start convulsing. Y'all do convulse. Y'all know that, don't you? It's like y'all start doing this. I love it when the ones start, closing their books and doing all that. That's when I really get pissed. And right now, for some reason, okay, that one worked, but the one on the right didn't work. There we go. Okay, here's an example. M&Ms in a bag. Well, the first thing you got to do is open the bag and count the M&Ms and divide them into what? Colors. And that's the colors, and then you just put them, there you go. That is a frequency distribution. Oh, now we get to talk about relative frequency. Does anybody know what the relative frequency is? See, I ask you what a relative frequency is, and everybody says, I don't know. But what if I ask you what a percentage is? You know what a percentage is, right? Relative frequency is a 25-cent word for percent. So, in order to have a percent, you got to have a total. Somebody tell me what the total is on the M&M bags here. Well, 22 plus 6 is 28, 31, 36, and I done lost it. 45, somebody tell me if that's 45. I'm sorry, what?
That's it, I think so.
Okay, check it. Somebody gonna pull out their phone because they can't add more than 2 digits. So go ahead, and some of you calculator drill team people in high school, go ahead and check me. Y'all know the calculator drill team, y'all can pull it out and like a rifle, you can. 45? It's a miracle. So the denominator is going to be 45. So somebody give me the relative frequency of brown M&Ms. 12 over 45. That's it. It's a fraction. So 10 over 45, 9 over 45, 6 over 45, 3 over 45, and 5 over 45. So you would add another column, and you would call it relative frequency. They'll probably, I don't know if they'll do it on the next slide or not. But go ahead and just add another column. And just put REL, frequency, FREQ, and then put the fractions down here. Now each one of you know that you have to change it to a percentage, but sometimes they do ask you for the percent, sometimes they ask you for the fraction. So make sure you read the directions whenever, whether it's a homework question or a test question, make sure you read, leave in the form of a reduced fraction or as a decimal, or as a percent. 9 over 45, would you leave it 9 over 45? Yes or no? No, you would reduce it to 1 what? Fifth. Always reduce fractions, which is equal to 0.2, because you put 5, make it into a 10, that would make the numerator into a 2, which would be 0.2. 2 over 10 is 0.2. I showed that to a class one time and they couldn't believe it. I'm like, good God, what have you been learning the last 12 years? Oh yeah, who did the first this and who did the first that? Yeah, y'all don't learn any of the good stuff. Whew. Too much vodka. Next, there is the relative frequency. The head count over the total. You starting to see what I'm talking about here? You're starting to see that a lot of stuff that's in probability and statistic, you already know, you just don't know the big words. What's sad is there's actually people that don't tell you that there's common words that you can use for relative frequency. They sit up there and go, the relative frequency is the proportion of blah, blah, blah. Start to sound like Charlie Brown's teacher. And then y'all start to snore and yawn, right? You have to be drugged out or no sleep in 2 days to fall asleep in my class. It's unheard of. Not that I'm exciting, make this exciting, but I'm just loud. A relative frequency distribution lists each category of the data with the relative frequency. Okay, here we go. We're going to do it. Wow. That's what you should have got. Is this a test question? Yes. Is it a standardized test question? Yes. Just don't forget that the relative frequency is nothing but a what? Percent. We'll just put that up here. There. And I guarantee you there's somebody in here that had this as a test question in high school and didn't know how to do it because it said relative frequency. Nobody gonna say anything. You don't have to. That's fine. I know there's people out there. Okay, here we go with a bar graph. A bar graph is what is, hold on, there. There is a bar graph. Now, is the bar graph legitimate? Yes. If you're in a math class or a science class, they're going to ask you to draw a bar graph or a bar chart. Nobody is going to tell you to draw a histogram. Okay, because a histogram, you mash those purple, take those purple boxes and put them side by side. That's a histogram. Now, I want somebody to tell me the mathematical relevance, of purple boxes touching each other and not touching each other. There's no mathematical reason for it. And I'm sorry, I think it's ridiculous to make people have two definitions when there's only one. A bar graph is a bar graph. Whether you touch the bars together or you don't, it's a bar graph. So make sure you can read a bar graph. That's a test question, a standardized test question. How do you get the total? Well, it's 12 plus 10 plus 9 plus 6 plus 3 plus 5. You should be able to read a bar graph. And I really think that most high school students can read a bar graph. I'm not trying to insult your intelligence, but I just want you to be aware of it because that could be a test question. Okay, we're going to cut her off now because it's 9:15, 9:20-ish. Okay, hold on. Now, while you're convulsing, and doing your thing, I'm going to pull up the attendance. So I don't want you to leave because I want to go over a couple of things. So go ahead and go through your convulsing. And I ask you to go through your convulsing, you're quiet. But if I don't ask you and I'm teaching, you get all loud. Why is that? Oh, you're trying to tell me something. Let me cut off the handy dandy recording so it can